and our tāne, our precious tāne, our men, and our boys are. I see a lot of struggles around trying to find a role. What is the role of our men where they feel valued, where they feel loved, where they can express love and feel safe, to be vulnerable, to find, to find words from the heart, because a lot of our men don't have language for emotions. They've, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, one of the overarching cultures or norms for our men is strong silent type, dominate nature, don't have feelings, because feelings are weak. Feelings are things that wahine or women have, or people of non-binary people have. So men don't have feelings and are strong. And I mean, this is not possible. This is not a healthy way to try to live, and yet that's what a lot of our men are learning about. This is how it is to be a man in Aotearoa, New Zealand right now. So they're set up to fail. Men are set up to fail in many places here.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Going Out Looking in, the podcast where we're exploring the human experience through conscious conversations. My name is Maxi, I'm your host, and today we are exploring the world of the Māori culture of death and dying, mental health, and emotional well-being, and that is with my guest, a force of nature, a beautiful, powerful woman who is Dr. Hinemoa Elder. Hinemoa is a New Zealand youth forensic psychiatrist. She's a former television presenter, she's an author, she's a mentor, she's a speaker, she's a mom. She's also a professor in Indigenous research, a fellow of the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists, and she also sits on the Māori Advisory Committee of the Centre for Brain Research. There you go, people. That's a mouthful. Someone who is wearing so many hats, someone that inspires me deeply. And this conversation is a testament to a gut feeling that I had from the moment that I saw Hinemoa first. I feel like she's speaking from such a tender place of wisdom, and offers just an insight into a culture, the Māori culture, that just as other indigenous cultures offer so much wisdom for the world that we live in today, which seems to be evolving, developing, but is this evolution linear? Well, I doubt it, to be honest, and I feel like there's so much that we can learn when also not only looking forward but also specifically looking back and remembering. And this is an essential part of Hinemoa's mission, I feel like, is the remembrance and the collective wisdom that is present, spiritually, especially when looking at the Māori culture. Now, that being said, this conversation involves a dear topic that is very close to me for a variety of reasons, since embarking on somewhat the, you might want to call the inner journey, and that is death and dying. And especially, as speaking to a Māori, I feel like with Hinemoa, we got to explore this topic in a very beautiful way, in a very respectful way, in a very humble and honest way. So we're talking about death, we're talking about dying, we're talking about the wisdom that the Māori bring to this topic. We are speaking about mental health, Hinemoa's experience with working with people who are struggling with that as a youth psychiatrist. And we're speaking about the spiritual aspects of this experience through the lens of an indigenous culture. I'm so happy to have these conversations. I'm learning so much just in the preparation for something like this, to immerse myself in the history of what happened and the, colonization that took place. It reminded me of my time in Australia, some experience I had there with the indigenous people, the Aborigines and the Aboriginal culture, and the revelation of the human cruelty, like the capability of human cruelty. It's heartbreaking, but it's part of the world we live in. It's part of being human, and to address that and to look at that and to make space for it, because only then, once you acknowledge this, you can integrate and process and down the line heal it. So I'm very fortunate for Dr. Hinemoa to have trusted me with this conversation. She's just such a gentle and loving and humorous and clever and inspiring individual, and I'm sure you'll understand, and I'm sure you get something out of this. All right. So with that being said, I wish you, as always, beautiful insights in this conversation with myself, Dr. Hinemoa, Elder. I start these off with a prayer usually, some sort of thing that comes through, and I'm super happy to do it this time again. And I thought of something that came up in the preparation for this, because I heard you speak about setting an intentional space yourself and using words in your language for that. So I just thought, if that resonates, I want to give some space for you to do that and to set the stage.
Ka pai. Me nui tātou. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te urutapu nui. Kia wātea, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana te wairua i te ara tangata. Koia rā e rongo, whakaire ake ki runga, kia tīna, tīna. Hui e, tai ki e.
Thank you. There is it carries a deep energy, these words. Can you share with us what this was about?
Of course. Yes, I'd be happy to translate into English. So this is a very well-known, simple karakia incantation, if you will, which talks about drawing together on the bringing forward a sacredness from the cosmos, I suppose would be another word for that, and to clear a path which frees up our hearts and our bodies and our spiritual energy, what we call wairua, and it calls forward one of our atua rongo. He is in charge of a few different areas. One is to do with peace, and another is to do with gardening. Maybe we'll touch on those later on. And it talks about that kind of protection, if you will, as we are drawn together in this particular meeting, kaupapa situation that we're in today.
That's beautiful. Thank you for this offering and that insight. I'm very curious to get to know more about the work you're doing and the culture that you share with the world, basically, and use your voice to do so in this incarnation. I feel it's very powerful, and I can sense the inspiration that you emanate through the screen, and I can sense it through your work. And so, given that, we can talk about it later. But now, here today, like what's alive today for you right now? With what are you checking in?
Well, there's a few things that are very much alive for me. It's morning for me here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I'm very fortunate in many ways. I live in a place, the same place that I've lived for more than 26 years. And in our modern societies, I think that this is quite a rare thing for many people. And it has taught me that actually living in the same place and getting to know the land and the ocean nearby is actually really, really nourishing. And what I've been noticing over the last few months is that there's one particular bird that I can send you a little video of this bird. I videoed them again this morning, who comes and sits and sings to the ocean from the balcony, and comes at around 7 a.m. every day, and has a big chat, has a big kōrero, says all the things that need to be said for about 10 minutes. That's not a short time. That bird has a few things to share in his in their morning kōrero, and then away they go. So that's something that is incredibly precious to me. Our old people paid a lot of store by watching birds and the formation of birds, what birds are doing, what birds are around. It was well known as a tohu. Many sayings in our culture are about observations of birds and the lessons that they draw on from birds for human beings. So those are just a couple of observations from my morning today.
Beautiful. What did you learn from it? What did you learn from the bird?
Wow, that is a pātai rangatira. That's a chiefly question. That's a good question. I reflect on watching that bird and their humble confidence, sitting out there, giving it their all to the world, from the forest area here on this side out to the sea, out to the sea that we can observe, which we call Hinemoa, and then beyond the horizon to Tangaroa. These are the different deities that are in charge of our oceans. And so I look at that humble little bird and I think, wow, we're all a bit like that. I feel like that. In the great vast forests of Tāne, the sacred forest of Tāne around me on this side, surrounded by many birds and beautiful trees, trying to speak some things into the world that are helpful, that are useful to other people, and to connect. Because the other thing I noticed listening to this humble bird is that other birds respond. This is not a conversation into the great void. There's a response. So I find that a comforting image and lesson from this little humble bird who's speaking with their own clarity, their own unique voice, like we all have. And maybe in the modern world we feel that our little voices are not so important. But I suppose these examples from nature invite us to see the importance of each of our own contributions to the greater conversation.
Well, I mean, I find it, and did so in the preparation for this, nothing short of inspiring and amazing to witness like your journey and like the different stages that you personally went through to where you are today, the different hats you're wearing from to. You're a daughter, but you're a mother. You are a professional in the, let's say, media landscape, but then, or you were, and then you're an author, then you're a forensic psychiatrist. You work within the, governmental structures of New Zealand and represent Māori culture. So I guess speaking about the bird, that's, and hearing you speak about that is just like, well, like you're like this humble servant and you using that voice of yours through all of those different modalities and different professional outlets. So I guess my question here is just, or I don't know, it's not really, it's more like an open space for you to share a little bit about this journey of yours. I would be very interested, like whatever you want to highlight, whatever comes up, like the different stations that led to where you are today. Just take us a little bit on that journey.
Ka pai. Thank you for that. And yes, it's interesting at different stages of our lives to reflect on what we've been through and how, as we grow, we reflect on our experiences in life in different ways. So I feel that now I'm nearing 60. In fact, it's going to be my birthday, my 59th birthday next week. And so I'm coming to, another milestone, if you will. And it is something I've been thinking about lately. So I suppose one of the key and most profound influences on my life has been my own mother. And when I think about our mother, I think about her mother and her mother and her mother and what we call whakapapa genealogy, the lines, the threads that we descend from. And so I do think of myself and our generation now as the representatives of those people that went before us. And so one of the things that has had a huge impact on my life is the fact that our mum died many years ago. She died 32 years ago, and she was only 56 when she died. So I'm older now than my mother was when she passed away. And there's been a lot in that for me over the years. I was pregnant with our son when she passed away, and it, she was there's so many things I could share about our mum. She was a very vibrant woman, a great parent, very nurturing, fun, knew how to help us learn through playful activities, creating things, making things. And so and she was a great cook. So, she involved us all in cooking, and so I've been able to pass that on. So both of my kids are really good cooks, which is great. That's a great legacy to pass on. Because cooking is a very social thing in many of our cultures, right? So if you can cook and involve other people in cooking, I think this is this is an important spiritual activity also, right? So, and when our mum passed away, she wanted her body to be donated to the medical school here in Auckland. And that's a pretty big deal for people from our culture. We don't usually get involved in things like that. We want the sacred, what we call the tūpapaku, the body of the person to be buried and buried together, all the parts, and that's it. And Mum didn't want that because she'd had breast cancer. She wanted to help and see if her body could be helpful for research and for medical students. And so through her gifting her body and that whole journey that we went through as a whānau, as an extended family, we got to know some people at the medical school. And then through that, I actually became a doctor. That's one of the pathways that she opened up, which I hadn't really considered as a younger schoolgirl. I didn't think that was necessarily for me, even though I really enjoyed science. Our dad was a physicist, so science was a very ordinary, common thing in our household. And so, long story short, Mum really left those clues, I feel, for me to follow around pursuing a career in medicine as a Māori doctor, taking care of our people, bringing in a way that brought forward the cultural values and the cultural skills that were not necessarily available when she became ill. It was quite clear to us as a whānau that the health professionals that we were in contact with, even though they were, great, very caring people, the what we would call the mātauranga Māori, the Māori knowledge base wasn't really available to our mum when she was sick. So that's been one of the profound influences of our mum, and that continues. And so when I've been a specialist child and adolescent psychiatrist, and you mentioned I do some youth forensics too, for nearly 20 years now. So Mum died in 1991, and so she's with me all the time. I talk to her. We've got pictures of her in the house, and she's a very present part of my decisions and keeps me safe. And so now, jumping forward in time, I've been very fortunate to be able to work at home where we come from. So I live on a small island near Auckland, the biggest city in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But actually where we come from is in the far north of Aotearoa, so right at the top. And in the last few months, I've been able to go and do some primary mental health care clinics up in a small town called Kaitaia, and where I'm pretty much related to everyone. And so it's been wonderful as a specialist to offer the experience and the skills that I've developed to my own people, with my own people, and to think very broadly about how that legacy that our mum passed on to me is then passed on back home in a very hands-on way with our own people, and also to show, and I've been going back home regularly over the years, but this has given me a chance to go back every week. And so now I have the opportunity to provide these clinics 2 days a week at the moment through a large GP practice or family medicine practice in the centre of Kaitaia, and also outreach into some of the other settlements, all of which I whakapapa to, so I have genealogical links to those other settlements and the people in those settlements. So just to give a tiny little window into some of the most profound experiences in my life and how I think about how they're all connected. And I think we all, we go through, terrible losses and grief, and the heaviness of that and the pain of that is very real And that's certainly another layer to what goes on for me. And I miss my mum every day, and I get angry with her sometimes for having not being physically available, and yet there's so many positive things that our old people who are not physically present continue to provide for us. So I use that kind of thinking in a therapeutic sense when I'm working with people, because all our families all around the world have such experiences. We have loved people who have passed away, and how we process that grief and loss, and how we then find healthy ways to draw on the strengths of that experience to cope differently, to live in a way that upholds and honours the people that we've lost in that way, and that we still keep with us. So those are just a couple of moments that might be interesting for people listening.
Thank you for sharing that. I would be interested in your experience and what you have to say about and share with us about the relationship to death, your personal relationship to it, potentially influenced by the Maori wisdom and insights.
This is another very important topic. Death and dying is an incredibly central aspect of our culture. We have a whole lot of processes and rituals around death, and we call the funeral a tangihanga. So, in fact, many people talk about how this is one of the places where our cultural values and our cultural practices are most preserved, actually, is around death and dying. And so what you would experience if you came with me to a tangihanga of one of our relations here would be a very profound experience. And actually, some of you might have seen or heard about the recent tangihanga of our Māori king, who died just a few weeks ago. And so many of us, many thousands and thousands of people, Māori and non-Māori, dignitaries from around the world, in fact, also went to pay their respects to our Māori king, King I Tuheitia. And because he was a person he'd been the king for about 18 years after his mother passed away, and he had in recent times really given clarity around kotahitanga, the unity of our people, as being a paramount, I want to say, whāinga, thing to pursue, goal. And so just to give a very recent poignant example for many of us here about our tangihanga. So what you would experience if you came with me is that we would go to a very Māori place. You'd be able to see that there we'll be waiting by a structure similar to like a gate with maybe a slight roof to it. And I'm just thinking of our marae up in Takao, Waimirirangi. And so we'll often wear pare kawakawa, so leaves of certain plants and trees around our heads as a symbol of our grief and loss. And so there are certain trees and plants from the north that we wear as people from the north. So puriri leaves from the puriri tree would be one. And we wait at the gate. And in many places we would wear black, but in other places that's not essential. But we wear formal clothes. And so we wait at that gate, and you're looking forward, you can see that we're going to walk towards a large meeting house. We call that the whare hui or the whare nui. and that represents the body of the ancestor. So the front end is the head, and we actually call the veranda the roro is the name in many places, or that's another word for the brains. So the front part of that house is the head, and the place where we can think about intellect perhaps. And then we will be called by a woman from that place to come into the house, or to come into the marae atia, which is the open space in front of the house. And someone from our group will call back to her. In some parts of the country, that will be another woman. Sometimes in the north, it will actually be a man. So we have different ways of doing this in different tribal regions. And so we'll walk forward as a group, and you will hear a particular kind of wailing. And actually the marae atia is under the guardianship of another one of our atua, and that is tūmatoenga. And so then we pass through that realm, and the calling of the women is called the karanga, or the women and the men is called the karanga usually, and that is a call that happens in a different realm. So it takes us and it provides a conversation in the wairua realm. We call it wairua. You might call it spirituality, or it's also about connectivity, about the connectivity between us and the whole universe. And then we're called there, and we'll hear the women usually saying some things about the person who's passed away, and why we're here to remember them and to celebrate them. And then we'll go in, and it can happen outside on the marae in the open space, or inside the house, and we'll go towards there'll be an open casket most commonly, so that's maybe different to some practices that people are more familiar with in other parts of the world, but we usually have an open casket, or in some places we are reclaiming traditions around having not having a coffin, but having a woven structure around the person, usually made from flax or some other kind of plant. And we do have a lot of practices in preparing the bodies too. That's another conversation. And so then we'll go and pay respects and kiss the people around the body. It happens a bit differently in different parts of the country, and then we might go and sit down, and at that point, and we'll have people speaking from the home people, the people of that place, and the visitors, if we are the visitors. And then we'll sing. After our speakers, we sing some kind of waiata tangi perhaps, or a lament of some kind, which is appropriate for that particular setting. And so we'll recognise all of our speakers, and we sing a song for each of our speakers, and then there'll be some process of coming together, maybe with a hongi where we share the breath. And we can talk, maybe if we want to, we can talk about how, of course, during COVID, these things were not allowed. And that was very, very difficult. And we had to modify our practices to keep our people alive and to keep our people safe. So usually our tangihanga, and then because we've been in a sacred environment, we've created a sacred environment, we need to go and eat some food, and the food makes us normal again, makes us ordinary again. So we go and have a cup of tea and something to eat. And commonly the tangihanga lasts for us ordinary people 3 days. If it's a very important person like the king and the royal the kahui ariki, the royal people, then it can last longer than that, because of course there's many more people who need to come and pay their respects. So usually 3 days, and then there's a special ceremony around going to bury the person in a special place that we call an urupa. And then there's all sorts of other practices around going to the person's home and making sure their home is now safe, and then coming back together and usually having a big feast and sharing memories of our loved one. And another thing that we do is we come back a year later, or sometimes a few years later, and we have an unveiling of the headstone of the person in the urupa, and we again have a similar process. We call it a pōheri process, where we gather, we have these rituals of encounter where we meet and greet and create that sacred environment to create that safety. And then we make ourselves ordinary again in order to go back to our ordinary lives. So death and everything surrounding death is actually such a critical part of our lives. And that's something that I've certainly come to realize in my adult years as a Māori woman, is that we have a lot more contact with death. In fact, that's something I noticed as a child and adolescent psychiatrist right from my early days as a registrar and a specialist, was that our Māori children, our tamariki mokopuna Māori, have been around a lot more people who've passed on than our non-Māori children. And that has all sorts of different effects. So maybe, I'm not sure if you want to ask me any more about that.
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for sharing all of this. Like, I was just like on the edge of my seat and just really closely listening and seeing the whole thing like play out in front of my inner eye. And it sounds like, and I'm sure it is, a very intentional portal that you are entering. I love the image of using food as a conduit for grounding, as I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my summary, as a closing of the ceremony, like the return to the body, return to the elements, return to the terrestrial sphere, if you want to say so, the earthly realm. I love that. And so the question that's coming up, what is the what's the insight from within the Maori culture around the dying? Is it what happens when someone's dying?
Okay.
Yeah, like your mom seems very present still, so yeah.
Yeah, that's again, Patai Pai. So in the process of dying, it varies. As far as I'm aware, there are some key things that can be done. So in our wider whānau, there are a couple of people who I know get asked to come in and do what's called a tuku, to tuku the wairua of the person. So sometimes when people are really sick, it's like they're not quite sure how to actually die. And they need someone to help let the spirit, let the wairua be released. And so there are a couple of my cousins I know that actually get called upon to do this. And this is a very sacred job. And so sometimes people get a bit stuck and their wairua is not releasing for some reason. That is outside of my realm, but I know that some of our relations, they are involved with this very specialized area. Once the wairua has left the body, we believe in the Far North that there are a number of special places that the wairua travels to, and we know the names of those places. Our kaumātua, our elders, if you like, can recite the names of those places, and in fact we can go to those physical places and see them, and eventually the wairua travels to the top of the country and then goes down in a special way and travels under the ocean through some caves and goes away to a place we call Hawaii. And so there are many beliefs and experiences in our part of Aotearoa that we hold dear around the journey of the wairua. One of the beaches, the very long beach, Te Oneroa Tohe, or it's called in English the 90-mile beach, a kind of strange English name because it's not 90 miles long at all, but there you go. But we call it Te Oneroa Tohe, Tohe's long beach, and the wairua travels along parts of that beach. And this is all part of the whenua, the land of our people. So we are people who are very comfortable with these things. In general, we are very open and accepting of all of these experiences that people have. So those are just a few thoughts about the wairua of the person when they pass away. And sometimes that wairua might need a little assistance, and people can come and help the people that have those special abilities to help to tuku the wairua to when it's actually ready to go.
Right. Beautiful. Is there a specific way to connect to what I'm hearing is the journey of the soul of a past one? Is there any ritual, any prayer, any, like, maybe a physical, like you could go to that place, maybe, I'm assuming, like, are there ways of connecting to this, to the soul?
Well, I think in general we all recognize that our wairua, our soul, our spiritual connectivity to the whole of nature, to the whole of the universe, is something we live with and we experience in different ways every single day. So sometimes it can be quite hard for people to feel, well, what is that about? Where is that? How do I know that that's within me? Especially working in mental health, we recognize that in Māori mental health, we need to understand that for us as Māori, the wairua, the spiritual aspect of our lives, is the basis of everything. That's the foundation of everything else. And so one of the things that I often talk with our tamariki mokopuna, with our young people and our whānau about this, I say, it's the young people use this term, the vibes, right? They talk about they get good vibes or not so good vibes from different things. So if you go to a certain place and you pick up some weird feelings and you don't feel comfortable, and sometimes it's a feeling in your puku, in your stomach, where you go, this doesn't feel right to me. So I use this as an example in my practice, and I'll say, so those experiences are actually what we think of as your wairua giving you some feedback. There's something a bit off here, and you need to listen to that. Pay attention to that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because in our wider culture, there's so much emphasis placed on what we might call logic and reason and being objective. And these things are also important. They're very important ideas. And yet they seem to dominate ideas about intuition and what we would call wairua, spiritual connectivity, which is also really, really important. But of course, because it's hard to measure in a conventional scientific paradigm sense, then it doesn't attract funding for research and these kinds of activities. And so it tends to be, frankly, denigrated. And as a Western-trained doctor, as a Western-trained psychiatrist, I feel very comfortable to talk about, well, just because we can't measure it, just because we can't, compartmentalize it, it's unscientific of us to denigrate that experience that people are having. And we're now seeing research in areas like psychoneuroimmunology and other areas that begin in people who have near-death experiences and other things like that, that are extraordinary and really hard to understand from a purely kind of logic, reason, objectivity perspective. And so for me, talking more broadly about the fundamental feelings that we have that are quite hard to put into words, we can't just brush them aside and say, well, we can't measure them so they don't exist. That's unscientific to my way of thinking as a Western trained scientist. So long-winded way of saying, I think there are many rituals where we can enhance our experience of wairua. Doing karakia, do an incantation or a prayer is one. So we started our conversation like that, and we will end our conversation like that too. And that's how we hold and draw in a different kind of experience. One of the things that I've noticed commonly is when I'm asked to see young people, for example, some of our young people who are in trouble with the law, and I always say, let's start with a karakia. And they never turn me down. And I see these young people, if they have a hat on, if they have a cap on, they take it off. These are our young people who perhaps, haven't grown up with the reo, like many of us. They haven't grown up knowing much about their connection to our culture so far. And yet so often at the end of these encounters, these young people who are on the surface quite tough and have had hard lives will cry. And they'll say to me, "Oh, doctor, no one ever did a karakia for me before." And so these moments are profound for me, and such and so strong. So I will say, "Wow, first of many, and are you interested in learning some yourself? And how can we keep the momentum of that interest going? Because these are the things that are going to be really healing and practical." I think this is another thing about doing things in the spiritual realm, is it's not some sort of airy-fairy thing. It's actually ancient health and safety practice around keeping our entire being safe and healthy as we move around in the world. And there are other things going on in the world that our wairua is trying to steer us away from negative experiences, and people who have maybe negative intentions towards us, and our wairua is trying to steer us towards positive things. If only we knew how to work more closely with those messages that are in fact coming through, whether it's a little manu, a little bird in the morning singing away, going, "Oh, this is a wairua experience. Mm-hmm. This is something that lifts my wairua and lifts my gaze, my physical eye gaze, but also my spiritual gaze into a different perspective."
Who hears will hear, and who sees will see. I guess that, there's so many ways we can be in this world, and I feel like I remember actually several times in history, in recent history as well, where I and we potentially were told to listen to the facts. Whatever that is supposed to mean. Where does that take place? Well, probably right here. And it's actually funny because just before this call, I'm working a lot with men within masculine, like male spaces of healing, especially as we see, drastically rising numbers in male suicide and depression, especially compared to women. And so there's like such a, in my opinion, demand for spaces for men to gather and, you know, do the work necessary in order to prevent these things from happening and stuff. And which is so funny, because what I'm observing there is the number one job for any of these spaces is actually to guide men from this place to this place. The longest road we'll ever travel. And I take it with a huge grain of salt whenever anyone sort of puts a very strong emphasis on this realm without addressing this one, and actually actually sort of like the narrative that one is superior to the other. I find that highly dangerous and concerning, at least. So, and that's just my experience, because when I hear a man talk about why he's not doing well, there's all stuff intellectually that's coming up. But in order to really resolve anything on a deeper level, I don't want to hear some intellectual concepts. Because oftentimes that's exactly the reason why all those men are where they're at, and they're stuck there. And so it's like, how do we guide you to that voice that you were speaking about just now, which often knows. So yeah, that's just a very personal matter to me. And also a personal matter to me is to give some space. And I got very emotional in the preparation for this, because I heard about your personal experience with suicide and the passing of your brother. So I wanted to ask you about, you know, and give you some room for that, how that experience also may have affected your trajectory in life, and some general outlook on these kind of topics for you.
Oh, kia ora. I think our men's health is so important, and has been neglected for a long time, and so many aspects of our society have maintained these structures that keep men ill, keep men unwell, and keep men in a kind of emotional prison. So a few things. In our culture, Hinemoa, who's the goddess of mind, lives in the whole body. She does. She lives in the heart. She lives in the puku. She lives in the liver. She lives in the head. So she lives in all the places. So for us, the mind is not all up here. And you know, I work in neuroscience. I work in neuropsychiatry, and so I've been very much in the tension, in the friction point at the interface of these worlds, these worldviews, and how neuroscience has attracted, you know, huge amounts of funding, and appropriately so, and that it's usually takes a very narrow focus, which is all about, you know, what's in the brain. But in fact, more and more research is happening which recognizes that the brain, mind, body system is actually a whole body system. So that's one facet, I think, that's touching on where we want to go with this part of the conversation. And to talk about our men, yes, so my younger brother Maru died. He took his own life in 1999, and he had a very serious mental illness, and it was, you know, it's as a practicing psychiatrist, you know, I suppose the gift that he's given me is to know as a whānau member, as a family member, a bit about what whānau members are going through when that's happening there. And this is an epidemic in our country, and particularly for our Māori men. We have terribly high rates, particularly our young Māori boys and men, of suicide, and it has so much pain and so many ripple effects around it for generations. So really, one of the things that I want to do and I aim to do and I work with every day is to find ways to help people identify other options than ending their lives. That is an option that I would like to see eliminated from our way of living right now. That there's always something else that can be done. There's always another choice. There's always another conversation. There's always another moment that might be a bit less painful that can be discovered. And that's a big ask, because people are in so much pain and suffering, and often they're using substances to try to cope with that, and that complicates decision making too. And our tāne, our precious tāne, our men and our boys are. I see a lot of struggles around trying to find a role. What is the role of our men where they feel valued, where they feel loved, where they can express love and feel safe, to be vulnerable, to find, to find words from the heart, because a lot of our men don't have language for emotions. They've, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, one of the overarching cultures or norms for our men is strong silent type, dominate nature, don't have feelings, because feelings are weak. Feelings are things that wahine or women have, or people of non-binary people have. So men don't have feelings and are strong. And I mean, this is not possible. This is not a healthy way to try to live, and yet that's what a lot of our men are learning about. This is how it is to be a man in Aotearoa, New Zealand right now. So they're set up to fail. Men are set up to fail in many places here, and we're given this sort of unattainable standards. Like you can be like an All Black, you can be like a rugby player, big, strong fella. Put your body on the line, dominate nature, put some fence posts in the ground, don't talk about your feelings. And is it any wonder that our men are struggling with their mental health? Because they're expected to live in this narrow window of human experience, and when they start to feel anything uncomfortable, they care about their mates, they care about their friends, but they've got to be careful how they express their feelings for their other friends. That can be problematic. They have to be careful about how they express their love for their partners, their children, their parents. So it's a very hard way to live. It's hard to be healthy and have a healthy experience of being alive when you're trying to limit yourself to live in this seemingly only rational, logical, non-emotional way.
Yes.
It's impossible.
Yes. And when you look at the reasons of male depression and suicide, the lone wolf syndrome and loneliness in general, I have to do it alone. I got to be strong. That narrative, which is embedded in the masculine psyche, is the driving force behind this epidemic of male suicides. And what is the antidote to that? It's belonging, it's like you said, purpose. Yeah. And also, as we see, that's not coming from me, ego, just down on myself. That's like up, look up, come on. Like what's around you and lift the spirit up, and then we are right back where we started. That's the spiritual
Yeah.
realm. That's the place. I'm not alone. I may be even physically I may be alone, but truly I'm not alone because I'm connected. And so that's why with the organization that I work with, who actually branches out internationally, we started in North America with Sacred Sons. It's the organization. We had our first gatherings in Australia, and I'm sure New Zealand will follow. So this work needs to be done. It needs to be talked about, and that's what we do here. So partially, I mean, it just came up now, but I felt like, giving it a little bit of space.
That's so fitting because I love that you said look up. This is also one of my favorite things to say, because one of the other resources that's freely available is our Māori moon, the lunar calendar. And so, today is Tangaroa Āmua, which is about the ocean, which is an incredible metaphor for so many things: depth, breadth, all sorts of tides and currents and human emotions, and the relationship with Hina, our Māori moon. And so today is to do with looking up at Hina. I mean, every day we can do that, right? She's available, and even if it's a cloudy day, we can imagine her and tune into what face is she showing us today. So we are coming towards the latter part of our lunar cycle, back towards Whiro, the new moon. And so this last phase, if you will, for us is about saluting and recognizing some of our deities, our atua and Tangaroa. Tangaroa is one. So I think for us to offer to the global community, perhaps, in different ways, people of different genders will take different lessons from this. But the idea for today is to look beyond the horizon. So that's about looking up and out and looking at the future and recognizing that there is a horizon that we can see beyond. And the other invitation today is really about laughter and humor, and I think humor is something that all of these different groups in our society that we belong to in different ways, our tāne, our wahine, our tamariki, our different generations and genders, we all have different playfulness and humor that we can call on. And today is a day for that. And so that's one of the things I love about using our Māori lunar calendar in my practice as a mum, as a wannabe grandmother of the future, as a descendant, is to really learn how to recognize that those resources are available to us every single day, and there's a new lesson, and we get to go round this cycle again and again. If we didn't quite get it all last month, we get another chance to try it again this month and see, I learned something a bit different. I thought I knew all about Tangaroa Āmua, but actually there's a few new little wrinkles in the story. And I think that's the key thing. It's about our stories of every day give us some resources beyond facts. Yes, there will always be facts, but what are the stories that we can tell that draw the facts into a more emotional and spiritual, meaningful daily reality?
Yes. Well, Hinemoa, to be honest, like I'm looking down on my preparation sheet, and it's like one or two things were touched. I mean, I literally think we could, like, wow, the energy's flowing, and I'm just actually, although it's bedtime, I'm fully energized, and I'm online, and but I want to be, obviously, I want to be respectful of your time, and let me just say that I'm so grateful for creation to have somehow facilitated this exchange, and I feel like the work you're doing in the world is so powerful, and how you're showing up, and I truly admire everything you stand for. So thank you so much for this
Ngā
conversation.
mihi. It's been a real privilege to share this time with you, and I would love to just close us off with a karakia. Okay. Me nui tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu. Ti hei Māori ora.
Thank you so much. Hey, beautiful listener, you have made it all the way through. And I want to take a moment to say thank you. And you can do me an enormous favor. It's all I'm going to ever ask from you. And that is to go to your podcast app right now. And if you enjoyed the episode, give the podcast a 5-star rating. If you want to write 1-2 words or sentences, even more powerful, even better, thank you already in advance. And also, while you're at it, just click on that follow button, on that bell notification, so that you never miss a new episode. All of that just contributes, and it helps me to increase the reach of the podcast. That means I can attract bigger guests, and that means I can deliver more powerful episodes. So it's a tiny thing. I'm only gonna ask this little favor of you ever, not more. 10-15 seconds of your time, a couple of clicks, that's it. Makes a huge difference for me as a creator. So thank you so much.